As the who fades away, who are you is the question we all have to find the answer to. For anyone important in our lives, and particularly for those we vote for, to have power over us. There's a common assumption by most that we are all basically the same with the intention of a positive, harmonious future between peoples. It is one of the objectives of this presentation to show why this is unfortunately far from the truth. The first slide shows the famous Flammarion engraving of 1888, with the man crawling under the edge of the sky or firmament to see what lies beyond. He represents mankind being pursued and programmed by the Gnostic Counterfeit Spirit. On the right are some entities that have been partially or fully under its control. The prime sources of the following can be found in the books above, which I would recommend to all to consider. Before we continue, a warning that the following turns on its head probably most of what you thought you knew about Western religion, our universe, and its origins. Old Father God looking down on his perfect creation with Jesus and the devil, it's not. A quick aside before we get going. In April 2018, Pope Francis, in his Doctrine of the Faith statement, warned of the threat of Gnosticism within the church, which he describes as a temptation to do with modern weaknesses. Yes, fortunately, an increasing weakness to believe in all authorities without question. So we start with the ancient mysteries for which initiates would have received a life-changing experience. Initiation was a full assault on the senses, so hallucinogens would also have been used. So here are some mild visual psychedelics to set the scene. Knowledge of the mysteries begins in Egypt at least 4,500 years ago, when the Osiris story was written in the pyramid texts, but it's probably as old as 20,000 years. It is the primal myth of the mystery of the dying and resurrecting God-man, Osiris, and the goddess Isis. The basic story is that Osiris, the just ruler, who is a man but also part divine, is killed and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, who is controlled by the counterfeit spirit, someone we would call today a psychopath. Isis then collects the scattered, dismembered parts of Osiris, connects them, and magically resurrects Osiris back to life. Around 500 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus witnessed the Egyptians' reenactment of the death and resurrection of Osiris, which was performed each year in front of tens of thousands of men and women as an initiation ritual. It was clearly understood that this reenactment was not meant to be taken literally as an historical fact, but was a metaphor or allegorical story with a hidden meaning. So the meaning was, human beings can be part man and part God. A seeker of truth will be confronted with evil. They must let their purely material nature die. They must seek the assistance of the divine feminine energy, i.e. Isis, Shakti, Kundalini. They must be reborn spiritually, i.e. to make a spiritual connection with the cosmos. A key player in the expansion of the mysteries, who has been misrepresented by history and therefore only known by most because of the mathematics theorem he made famous, he is, of course, the Greek Pythagoras. Born around 570 BC, while still a young man, he traveled to Egypt around 540 BC, which previously had been a closed country to foreigners. He spent 22 years in the temples there, becoming an initiate of the ancient Egyptian mysteries and learning everything he could about their esoteric sciences, astrology, numerology, sacred geometry, alchemy, etc. Pythagoras was now part scientist, part priest, and part magician. From Egypt, he went to Babylon for about 5 years, where he again absorbed as much of their esoteric knowledge and mathematics, including the famous theorem. Pythagoras' interest in mathematics was purely for mystical purposes. On returning to Greece, he began to preach the wisdom he had learned, creating a monastic-like esoteric school. He believed he had come from elsewhere to assist humanity and openly described 4 of his previous lives. By the end of his time, in around 475-500 BC, he had become a legendary godman performing miracles, said to have been, and that's off the bottom, seen in 2 places at once, controlling the weather, raising the dead, giving oracles, etc. In summary, Pythagoras was a brilliant man who holistically understood the ancient knowledge he had received and was able to put it into practice and disseminate it to others. What we would think of today as a yogic master, but it must be understood that he did not originate the mysteries and other esoteric knowledge, but received it from others. After the death of Pythagoras, disciples from the school he founded created a Greek mystery religion modeled on Osiris-Dionysus. They took the indigenous wine god Dionysus, who was a minor deity, and transformed him into a Greek version of Osiris. Dionysus was associated with various goddesses, including Ariadne, Demeter, and Aphrodite. This started a religious and cultural revolution that would transform Athens into the center of the then-known civilized world. The mystery rites of Demeter and Persephone had been celebrated at the Telesterian temple complex at Eleusis near Athens from about 700 BC. But by 435 BC, Dionysus and his goddess consorts had become the most popular. Each year, some 30,000 Athenian citizens embarked on a 20-mile barefoot pilgrimage to celebrate or be initiated into the autumn mysteries of Dionysus. At the height of their popularity in 31 BC, people were coming from all over the known world to be initiated, including a Brahmin priest from India. All initiates were sworn to secrecy and held the mysteries so sacred that they kept this oath. But it is known that it was the intention to shock all the senses by lights, sounds, heat, and a transformative, dramatic reenactment of the sacred myth. Recent archaeological evidence has unearthed fragments of ergot in an ancient Greek ceremonial cup dating back to 300 BC. Ergot is a fungus. No, it's jumped. Fungus found on cereal crops from which hallucinogenic drugs such as LSD can be made. Artists over the centuries have imagined and rendered scenes of the Eleusis mysteries. After initiation in September came celebration at Easter. Just as the Greeks recreated the Osiris-Isis story with their own mythological gods, other surrounding cultures had their own versions with the same essential message, i.e., the dying and resurrecting God-man. And so, our generic mystery temple of gods and goddesses, all with the same essential message, becomes rather crowded. But by 100 BC, the Greek Osiris-Dionysus version of the mystery story was the most complete and dominant version throughout the Mediterranean world. At this point, I repeat the earlier warning that the following will come as a shock to most, which reveals just how thoroughly and effective our cultural programming has been. Because the Osiris-Dionysus myth features included: Osiris-Dionysus is born in a cave on the 25th of December. The birth is prophesied by a star. Osiris-Dionysus is born of a mortal virgin who ascends to heaven and is honored as a divine being. The initiates of Osiris-Dionysus were baptized with water. Dionysus turns water into wine at a marriage ceremony. Osiris-Dionysus is surrounded by 12 disciples. Osiris-Dionysus rides triumphantly into a town on a donkey while crowds wave branches. Osiris-Dionysus is equated with bread and wine, which his followers eat to commune with him. Osiris-Dionysus is crucified around Easter time. Osiris-Dionysus descends to hell, then on the third day resurrects before his disciples and ascends to heaven. It has to be emphasized that this version of the myth or allegory of the dying and resurrecting God-man first appeared around 450 BC. That is, over 500 years before any Christian gospel stories. Other features of the pagan god-men sages included calming waters, raising winds, providing miraculous meals, miraculous catches of fish, exorcising demons, healing the sick, raising people from the dead. Out of Macedonia in 336 BC burst a counterfeit spirit-possessed Alexander. Known as Alexander the Great, primarily because he conquered and killed hundreds of thousands of people in a record period of time, using high-speed warfare with novel lance weapons. The same high-speed technique with modern weapons being used by Hitler in World War II, known as Blitzkrieg. Within 10 years, he had created one of the largest empires in history. He was a globalist with a counterfeit spirit mentality, i.e. a psychopath who wanted world domination and people controlled or dead, and would have much in common with our current globalists. Possibly 1 million killed or enslaved over 10 years, millions, so it's gone wrong here, displaced, hundreds of cities razed to the ground. Out of the shattered pieces of the Mediterranean world emerged Alexandria, a new city on the coast of Egypt in 331 BC, containing diasporas of displaced people from across the Mediterranean. By the end of the ancient era BC, Alexandria was the intellectual and cultural center of the Mediterranean world. It was home to the largest diaspora of Jews, and among them, a sect of philosophers known as the Therapeutae. They had combined their profound knowledge of the mysteries, including Judaism and Buddhism. Buddhism having arrived in Alexandria around 250 years earlier from Indian missionaries sent by the king Ashoka the Great. The Therapeutae, believed to be named after the Theravada Buddhists, lived just outside Alexandria at Lake Mareotis. They syncretized their own unique sect that combined the mystical knowledge of Pythagoras, Osiris-Dionysus, Moses, Buddhism, and Babylonian mysteries. They were connected with the Essenes and lived a monastic Buddhist lifestyle. In short, they were the pinnacle of mystical knowledge at this time. The only reason we know virtually anything about the Therapeutae is thanks to Philo of Alexandria from 20 BC to year 40. He was a philosopher initiate of the mysteries and either one of them or closely connected. During Philo's lifetime, the Romans took control over Israel. Over the next 40 years, the Jews in their homeland became increasingly desperate for a prophesied Messiah or a supernatural God-man to vanquish the hated Romans. That didn't happen as the Romans finally obliterated Jerusalem in year 60, but the following occurred coincidentally. Sometime after year 70, an anonymous religious text spreads across the Mediterranean and beyond over the next 200 years. It was written and first found in Alexandria. It was a version of the Outer Mysteries written in a Jewish cultural context. It cleverly combined the ancient myth of the dying and resurrecting God-man with the prophesied Jewish Messiah. Written in Greek and combining the key elements of the Osiris-Dionysus myth together with essentially Buddhist principles. Only the Therapeutai, who were Jews and also Buddhists, had the ability, knowledge, and incentive to write it. It had been written for the Jews in their homeland to give hope to alleviate their suffering under the Romans. In Rome, now the center of Mediterranean power, the philosophers and educated classes could see that this new story, being called Christianity, was simply another version of the Dionysus-Osiris myth. But to the uneducated populace, it had great appeal and novelty, as no intellectual interpretation, initiation, or meditational work was required. You simply had to declare your belief that this Savior had walked the earth, pay some money, and you received instant redemption. Its simplicity meant that it could easily become a racket by the unscrupulous, as it did, which is still happening today. A contemporary Lucian in the year 170 wrote, and this is rather large, if a professional sharper who knows how to capitalize on the situation gets amongst them, Christians, he makes himself a millionaire overnight, laughing up his sleeve at the simpletons. By the year 313, it had spread to the Germanic Goths and Visigoths, who were threatening Rome, hoping to appease these threats. In the year 321, the Emperor Constantine allows Christianity to be practiced. But within a few years, Christianity runs out of control. What it intended to be an allegorical teaching had become a belief as a supernatural literal event. By 386, bands of mad, largely self-appointed monks, friendlied with fundamentalist religion, were running amok throughout the empire, completely beyond the control of the law, destroying the temples of any alternative religions. Finally, in an attempt to regain control, the new emperor Theodosius issued an edict in 391 to close down all alternative religions. But instead of orderly closure, destruction only increased, including the wondrous temple of Serapis in Alexandria. Then in 415, Archbishop Cyril of Alexandria incited a Christian mob to murder the last great female mystery religion scientist of the famous library there. Hypatia was torn limb from limb, and Cyril was made a saint. The great works of hundreds of years of the mysteries and other knowledge was thrown into enormous bonfires. Owners burnt their entire libraries, so great was the terror. In summary, the Therapeutai had compiled the ancient mysteries into an introductory teaching story and an advanced spiritual knowledge known as Gnosticism. Unfortunately, the introductory story was too compelling for the uneducated who believed it as literal truth. Seeing the power that it had over the common people, those possessed by the counterfeit spirit saw it as the perfect tool for power, control, and money. Throughout the 5th century, the rising Christian religion, firmly in the power of semi-illiterate counterfeit spirit psychopaths, swept throughout the Roman Empire. All religious tolerance, knowledge of Christianity's mystery school origins, and alternative beliefs were ruthlessly expunged on pain, torture, and death. The 5th century was the beginning of nearly 1,500 years of dark ages, of ignorance, terror, millions being eliminated by the Catholic Church and its Spanish Inquisition, all knowledge of Gnosticism eradicated. "1,500 years later, in 1945, a chance event occurs in Nag Hammadi in Egypt. An Arab farmer boy discovers 13 papyrus books buried near an ancient Coptic monastery. The books are written in Greek, are copies of Gnosticism that had been eradicated during the Dark Ages. They contained the mystery knowledge that told us we are part of something much more complex in the universe, a universe within a multiverse. The latest scientific thinking is that there may be a multiverse of separated bubble universes. The Gnostic books, however, go beyond the physical universe to describe a light source dimension of infinite power, from which our physical universe and perhaps all others have been created. The following is just a quick summary of the Gnostic multiverse structure to get to the creation of our universe. Scrapping that one. Right. We start with what Orthodox Christians and others would call God, but the Gnostics call the parent of the entirety, or the first principle. About which little is known, other than its thinking produces the second principle, or the Holy Spirit. The next creation is known as the 10 aeons, or 10 eternal dimensions. All of these have many other names and attributes which can be assessed like Buddhist or Kabbalistic meditations. They are all living entities as well as different dimensions, all of which make creations in turn. From the 10 aeons, the next is called Christos, or kindness, the archetype of the Christian Christ concept, followed by the 4 luminaries. And finally, they in turn produce the 12 eternal dimensions. Up to this point, the Gnostics saying each successive creation has been successful and orderly. But from one of the 12 eternal dimensions known as Sophia, an unbalanced, hasty creation process occurs, and the result is so spiritually misshapen that its creator expels it into an external dark dimension. Finding itself alone and only vaguely aware of other entities from where it came, it became paranoid, egotistical, and aggressive. Its psychological mentality describes like a cross between a snake and a lion. Discovering its enormous power inherited from its creator, it made a lower energy, largely material creation, described as sparks of light in a dark place. Welcome, folks, to our material universe and the source of our bodies. So the bad news is that we are living in a neurotic universe. But fortunately, the light energy entities became fully aware and have devised a process to remedy the situation, which we shall come to. As a quick aside at this point, for those who know or study the Kabbalah, the tree of life fits here. The Ein Sof, or light without limit, above the tree is, of course, another name for the light source dimension. So our material universe creator, who has been given several names, the Demiurge, Aldebael, Samael, Saklos, or the blind god, filled the universe with a hierarchy of controlling forces called archons, or rulers. The first among these is the lion snake Demiurge itself. Second in command are the authorities, which are certain cosmological bodies, stars, and planets, all of which are entities which exert occult or unseen controlling forces. Third in command are known as the seven kings controlling certain cosmological areas of space. Each is described as having an archetypal appearance, or perhaps this is just another way of describing whereabouts in the cosmos they control. We cannot be sure. But as we know that planetary nebula are often given animal names, i.e. crab, eagle, snake, horsehead, etc., I've used that convention to identify them with a little artistic license and enhancement for clarity. First is called Athoth, with the face of a sheep, and quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. Second is called Eloes, with the face of a donkey, and quality of careful consideration of what may be necessary. Third is called Astathios, with the face of a hyena, and quality of being similar to the demiurge, i.e. paranoid, egotistical, and aggressive. Fourth is called Io, with the face of a serpent, and quality of possessing supreme power. Fifth is called Sabedi, with a glowing face of fire, and quality of possessing great intelligence. Sixth is called Adenin, with the face of an ape, and quality of great enthusiasm to pursue a cause. Seventh is called Sabaoth, with the face of a dragon, and has the quality of being the active cosmic enforcer. Each of the kings have created as assistants the biblical entities existing in the non-physical dimensions, i.e. the seraphim, angels, and demons, etc., with qualities commensurate with each king, i.e. helpful or destructive to other entities. The kings are also the archetypal forces who, together with the demiurge, are responsible for the creation of the physical entities in the universe. We can speculate that Sabaoth, who is referred to in the Bible as the Lord of Hosts, or the dragon, is responsible for the creation of the reptilians, who appear to consider themselves the enforcers of the cosmos status quo. So now we come to the creation of human beings, for which we have to return to the multiverse. The perfect mental and spiritual construct of a human being was created in the third creation called Christos, or kindness, which is represented in the outer mysteries, i.e. the Therapeuta's Jesus story, as the Christ, which in its original Greek means the anointed king, i.e. the one at the top, which is simply in this context a reference to the archetypal first perfect human being. At some point after its creation, the demiurge had managed to attain a dim, through a glass darkly distorted view of some of the perfect entities across the dimensional veil. Its attempt to copy them had resulted in the archons, rulers, we have just seen. Eventually, its awareness reached the creation of the perfect human being, and so it decided, with the assistance of its archons, to create its own version as a slave worker for their purposes in the material universe, in a material body. Their humanity was spiritually and mentally inferior, and like all its creations, susceptible to receive the energy of their own thinking, which ranged from the benevolent to the paranoid psychopathic to the demonic. And so the parent or source conceived a plan to correct the demiurge universe. A higher dimensional force, the light of the epinoia or divine autogenes, was projected into the material humans. This raised the humans' thinking and spiritual power above that of all the rulers and their creations. Furthermore, when a sufficient number of humans focus this power together, a critical mass will be reached which will correct the malformed universe. Whether this means that the energy of our universe will in a flash become part of the light multiverse, or just have all its deformed negative aspects corrected, is unknown. But whichever it is, will mean a colossal change and loss of power for the rulers, and therefore they don't want it. So when the rulers discovered that their humans were now above them and shining brighter in their thinking and spiritual power, they were greatly disturbed and wanted to suppress them. Although they could not deal directly with the higher dimensional energy, they used diverse means as follows to subjugate humanity. Missed it now. Control and enslavement by rulers. Occult forces of planets and stars. Rulers' creations, e.g. reptilians and other alien entities. Negative alien genetic manipulation. Lifespan reduction from 1,000 to approximately 80 years. Demonic possession by lower-level entities. False leaders' indoctrination, e.g. Tower of Babel. False religious beliefs. Control and enslavement by rulers and their human agents. Counterfeit spirit fixed human controllers. Eradication of higher knowledge in all subjects. False, useless mainstream media news, the protocols. Diversion through mindless entertainment. Emotional infantilization, stroke hypnosis, e.g. BBC. Poisonous food and drugs. Which brings us to the current mental, spiritual state of humanity. The following graphic, representing all of Earth-based humanity, irrespective of class, culture, or ethnicity, etc. Less than 1% are born with or receive, at an early age, a connected light channel to the light multiverse, called by the Gnostics the divine autogenes. They are Gnostics by definition, creative, have an innate sense of right and wrong, also known as light workers. At the polar opposite, less than 1% are born or receive at an early age the counterfeit spirit. The fixed counterfeit spirits person suffers from paranoia, is totally service to self, non-creative, and has no empathy for others, wanting all others either controlled or dead, i.e. they are psychopathic and often satanic. Both of these vibrationally opposite poles are fixed throughout their current incarnation. The majority of the population have only come under the conflicting influences of the second and third tier of rulers, the planets and stars, the seven kings or cosmological controllers, and the other dimensional influences. Some have a positive influence and some negative, such as the seraphim, angels, demons, and the material entity manipulators such as the Pleiadians, reptilians, tall whites, and many others. The consequence of this fog of conflicting occult influences and genetic manipulation is the majority have no innate spiritual orientation or intuitive sense of right or wrong and tend to remain materially orientated. It was while researching in the British Library in 1989 that I first discovered Gnosticism, which led to a remarkable series of coincidences resulting in receiving information from entities describing themselves as guardians of the solar system. They confirmed that the Gnostic information and described the majority of humanity in a spiritual context as empty vessels. The empty vessels are not fixed with intuitive belief, but look to those around them for direction, and in this way can absorb the light or the dark from a Gnostic or a counterfeit person or group, extending the polar opposites. The net result of all of this is, of course, what we have seen around us up to recent times, that the counterfeit spirit controllers, plus the empties who have been prey to the establishment education and mainstream media programming, are in the majority. One of the false beliefs that has been deliberately embedded in Western culture by forced translations of the original Therapeuta allegory and deliberately enforced by the counterfeit spirit controllers is the notion that all humans are basically the same and all aspire towards love and cooperative harmony with other humans, and those who do not have simply suffered unfortunate experiences in their present lifetime and have made them go astray. This simplistic explanation is far from the truth. The fixed counterfeit spirit-possessed person has the spiritual and mental mindset of the first ruler at the beginning. That is, it just thinks of itself, regards all other entities as a threat, that the natural order of the universe is to be predatory, and that the powerful by right should be in control, in a strict ritualistic hierarchy. And empathy and kindness belongs to the weak, who can easily be enslaved as tools for their purpose. An example of a low mentality counterfeit spirit was a TV interview with a football hooligan leader who described the thrill he received just before the extreme violence would start between his group and an opposing one. He described all those that participated as showing great spirit. To him, violence is the expression of spirit. Indeed, it is the predatory counterfeit spirit. An example of a higher level counterfeit spirit was related to me by a friend of mine who used to captain super yachts for the rich. On one occasion, he overheard 2 billionaires of European corporations chatting over a drink. One asked, "Well, you can have everything you want. What makes you want to get out of bed each day?" The other one thought about it and replied, "Knowing that there is another idiot out there who I can take all his money." i.e., he is showing his spirit as a predator who can consume a smaller fish. A Nobel Prize-winning example of this is the 1954 novel by William Golding, The Lord of the Flies. In it, a group of young British choir boys are stranded. I've lost my thing. Please, here. Stranded on an uninhabited island. The paranoid counterfeit spirits among them take control and program the empties, resulting in the majority. The counterfeits then demonstrate their predatory spirit by hunting, torturing, and killing the others who possess an innate sense of right and wrong, i.e., a Gnostic spirit. The following is a clip from the 1988 film They Live by John Carpenter, who understood the counterfeit's agenda. Although the counterfeits here are described as aliens, from the Gnostic viewpoint, there is no difference between alien or human counterfeits. In the film, the hero has acquired some special glasses that enabled him to see things as they really are.
What's your problem? I said, what's your problem?
How are you today, sir?
Okay, how's it going?
Fine, thank you. Thank you, sir.
They Live by John Carpenter, I recommend everyone to watch. We have, of course, all become aware of those who combine power and violence in the extreme. The satanic horrors taking place in the deep underground bases, the torture and destruction of large amounts of people in endless wars, which is simply Satanism writ large, and the counterfeit spirit in its full expression. But what we have to realize, unpalatable and difficult though it is that these people are not insane. They are simply a product of the true nature of this universe and its defective or neurotic creator. That is, nature is red in tooth and claw. The big fish is entitled to consume the smaller, enjoy the lower etheric frequencies of violence, and rule over the weaker. This is the natural order of things, and entities of this type throughout the universe wish it to stay that way and will continue to fight to keep it so. But as the energy from the light multiverse entities is still bleeding into and continually expanding our universe, they want to correct this, and so injected the higher dimensional force into humans where possible to eventually reach critical mass, as explained earlier. In summary, in modern military terms, Gnostics or light workers are as special forces that have been parachuted in behind enemy lines to eventually sabotage the universe status quo so it can be recovered or corrected by the entities of the light source dimension. And the hope for the future is that the mainstream media and establishment programming is dealt with, which could make extending the light pole to become majority a possibility. Thank you and good luck with your mission.